Welcome everyone to the Kentucky Kid. I'm your host, Kelly Berry. Thank you for joining me. Tuesday night was a big night for sports, both nationally and regionally. Michigan State just absolutely pancaked in-state rival Michigan 75-52. I'll get to that game a little bit later on in the show. The biggest news, though, especially in this area, was the Kentucky-Florida game Tuesday night. I mentioned in the last show that I thought Kentucky was guaranteed to lose this game, and it turned out I was right. They lost 69-52. But the biggest loss in this game was not the score, but it was the season-ending injury to Nerlens Noel. Wednesday afternoon, he had an MRI, and the MRI showed a torn ACL. He's done for the year. So how does this impact Kentucky as a team and Nerlens Noel's draft stock? To start off with Nerlens Noel's draft stock, I think it does impact it, but not really severely. It's not going to knock him out of a lottery pick or even out of the top 5, in my opinion. But ACL injuries do have a tendency to be repetitive injuries. And people don't like drafting players who have repetitive injuries, especially early on in their careers. Remember Greg Oden? He was a great player, had a very high ceiling, and was really capable of doing a lot of damage in the NBA. I mean, he was drafted ahead of Kevin Durant. But he had a lingering injury, and he has yet to play a full season in the NBA or even anything remotely close to a full season. But in addition to that, Noel was making great strides in his game. He was learning how to become a shot blocker without getting into the foul trouble that he had early in the season when he would leave his feet. He's learning how to score. He's learning how to shoot free throws. And suddenly, bam, this injury happens. Some NBA scouts might be concerned that that injury might affect his improvement that he showed really throughout the last month. He came along very strong as a player, but sometimes injuries can be major setbacks in a player's development. But finally, I think the thing that's going to hurt him most is that he doesn't have the opportunity to play on college's biggest stage. The SEC tournament was coming up. The NCAA tournament was coming up. And scouts and NBA teams love a player who can play in a tournament setting on a big stage. And the reason why is because unlike college, every game in the pros is a big stage. You're playing the best of the best. Game in, game out. Why do you think Kemba Walker was drafted so high? He doesn't have the best talent in the world, but he knew how to play in the clutch, in the biggest games. He won 11 postseason games in his last season at UConn. That's why he got drafted so high, and I fear that that might knock Noel out of a draft pick, that high one that he was projected at earlier in the season, because he doesn't have the opportunity to play in a tournament setting. But in addition to all those things, another thing to keep in mind is the recovery timetable that's set for him. The surgery that he has to have most of the time requires 6 to 8 months of rehab. Now, whether that means that in 6 to 8 months he'll be back to 100% or in 6 to 8 months he'll be back to playing at all, I don't know. But assuming even that he's back at full strength come October, which is 8 months from now, thinking worst case scenario here, that means that he wouldn't be able to play until the very beginning of the NBA season, which means he's going to miss all off-season training and all off-season gelling with whatever team decides to draft him. That's a major, major setback for a team's chemistry, especially considering that he would be a centerpiece to a team. So that's how Noel's injury impacts him personally. But how does it impact Kentucky as a team? I said in my last show that UK had guaranteed losses against Florida, and they stood up to my end of the bargain with the first game, losing 69-52. I said that the rest of the games were winnable on their schedule. Now I'm not so sure. They have toss-up games against Tennessee and Missouri. Remember, in Lexington, Kentucky only beat Tennessee by 10. Now, I think Kentucky has improved a lot since that early January matchup against the Vols, but they also had Noel. Knoxville has always been a very, very tough place for Kentucky to go. Regardless of how good Kentucky is or how bad Tennessee's been, it's always a close game when Tennessee is at home. That Tennessee crowd is raucous. And you know what? Kentucky, that young team, especially the young guards, tend to be a little shaky with the ball, especially on the road. I look for this game to be very close. I think it's a winnable game for Kentucky. But it will be interesting to see how Kentucky responds being on the road and being without their best player, arguably, in Nerlens Noel. With all of this said, I think Kentucky has 2 losses on their schedule, guaranteed. They have the Florida loss, and I think they lose either at Tennessee or at home against Missouri. The Florida game is a definitive L. There's just no question about that, in my opinion. You play this game 150 times, Florida's going to win it 151 times. That's how little I think Kentucky has a chance of winning this game. But the Tennessee and Missouri games are toss-ups. Now let's imagine for a second that Kentucky does win both of those games. Assuming they avoid any major slip-up against, say, an Arkansas or a Mississippi State or any of those other teams remaining on their schedule, then I think Kentucky's case for an NCAA tournament bid is pretty solid as long as they don't have an early exit in the SEC tournament. If they win one of the games, the toss-up games that I mentioned, Tennessee or Missouri, then they're a bubble team, but I think they're a solid bubble team, and they would be ahead of other teams like, say, a Temple or maybe even a Creighton. But if they lose both of those games, that means they would have at least 3 losses: Florida, Tennessee, Missouri. That would put them at least 6 losses in conference play and at least 10 losses overall. And that's not counting the SEC tournament, where I don't think Kentucky wins at all because, again, Florida's in it. The game last night, and really Noel's injury, also has a major impact on Kentucky's seeding in the tournament. Remember, the SEC got rid of the East-West format. Used to, it was the top 2 teams in the East got a bye and the top 2 teams in the West got a bye. Now, just the top 4 teams overall in the conference get a first-round bye. Kentucky's sitting at 2nd, really 3rd when you factor in the fact that Alabama has the tiebreaker over the Cats. But Missouri is very close. Ole Miss is very close, and considering that Noel is gone, I really don't think Kentucky holds on to that 2nd or 3rd seed in the SEC. The key for them is going to be winning all the games that they should, first off. Trying to notch a quality win against either a Tennessee or Missouri, and hopefully keeping that first round bye. Because if they win, say, 5 of their last 7 games, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't get a first round bye. But if they slip up and lose 3 or more than that, then you can kiss your first round bye goodbye. This game, as I've hinted to before, and the Noel injury, makes Kentucky's NCAA tournament status a little bit shakier than it was. Remember, Kentucky had a 5-game winning streak heading into this Florida game. Nobody really expected Kentucky to extend that winning streak, but the 5-game winning streak still looked impressive. Now, though, what happens is with Noel out, the committee is going to automatically think, as it should, that we're not as good of a team or anywhere close. That's going to dock our seed. A couple of extra losses that we probably wouldn't have got with Noel in the lineup is going to dock our seed. A couple of games where maybe we would win, but we would win by more with Noel in the lineup is going to dock our seed. Joe Lunardi, an ESPN bracketologist, had us before the Florida game sitting at a 9 seed. I think now our best bet, if we win every single game that we should, is probably a 10 through a 12. Despite all of the negatives surrounding this, and I know that this is something that no Kentucky fan wants to hear, This might prove to be a blessing in disguise for the individual players. It gives guys like Willie Cauley-Stein a chance to step up. It gives a guy like Poythress a chance to show his versatility, because Cauley-Stein has always played the center role. Now he's going to be called on to be playing the center role, the only center role. He's going to be the primary big man in Kentucky's lineup now. That gives him a big chance to prove himself. Poythress' versatility will be tested because he might be thrown in that 3 or 4 hybrid spot, kind of like what Tayshaun Prince was about 10 or 12 years ago.